you so much. We'll be introducing our next speaker, whose name is Mr. Stuart Prestedge. He is a software startup founder and CTO for 30 years with some very successful products and exits. He has been advising other startups for 5 years and now also has a training or coaching academy and course to help as many founders as possible. Today we have with us Stuart Prestedge, software startup coach. Thank you so much, Mr. Stuart, for being here. The platform is yours.
Thank you, Sandra. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation on the concept of concepts. As Sandra mentioned, my name is Stuart Prestedge, and I'm a technology advisor and a software startup coach. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying that I help startups. I help with anything technology related and lots of things business related. And in essence, it's my passion to help founders turn their idea into reality. Now, this means high quality software product, a team, and a business to start getting customers and revenue. And I do this by running an academy for founders. I have a training course for early stage founders, and I also advise and mentor founders, CEOs, and CTOs. Now, I've been creating software startups as a founder, as Sandra mentioned, for over 30 years, as a founder and a CTO, for over 30 years. And my first startup was back in 1988. Not quite before the term startup was used, but not far off. But even before that, when I was 12, I got my first computer. And within a couple of days, I'd learned BASIC and created my first app. I went on to create many others, mostly games, adventure games, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, if anyone can remember that far back, and some original award-winning games as well. And as I'm sure you can tell, I love writing apps and creating software solutions. So fast, in 1990, my business partner and I started creating a business app called Office Talk. Does anyone remember the Teletubbies? For some reason, I don't understand, they seem to have made their way into my logo. But anyway, Office Talk had everything. It had a mail client, a mail server, shared calendars, CRM, chat functionality, and much more. It was a beast. It was all things to all people. But when it came to sell, it was too confusing, and we didn't have anywhere near the number of sales that we were expecting, just a few thousand, in fact. And the reason for this? I didn't sit down beforehand and work out our business and technology requirements. This was a big lesson for me. From then onwards, whenever designing and creating a new product for myself, for someone else, or advising a founder, I make sure to understand the requirements. Now, fast forward 30 years, and I've created a structured process called the S5 methodology. This gets you from your idea to your structured documents, including requirements, wireframes, and specifications, all the way through to launch. And following the S5 methodology makes the whole process smoother, faster, cheaper, and higher quality. A far cry from those early days 30 years ago. Now, unfortunately, there's not enough time today to take you through the whole S5 methodology, but please connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to know more. Now, I'm sure most of you watching today, most of you founders watching today, have already been through the process of writing down your thoughts when first thinking about your software startup, i.e. your brain dump. Now, this may have been in the form of a mind map, but it can be a structured document. And as you may know, it can be quite large. In fact, I've worked with founders that have taken months and months to create this. There's a lot of information and it can be overwhelming. So how do you go from there to a full set of structured documentation. As I'm sure you've guessed, you break down the process into smaller steps. And again, unfortunately, I haven't got time to cover all of these steps now, but I do have a cheat sheet for you that outlines these steps, and I'll share a QR code in a few minutes so you can download this. So I'm just going to focus today on one important step of the journey. And that step is what I call defining your concepts. What are your concepts? The things in your ecosystem, basically the nouns and the verbs, the words and phrases that represent anything you might refer to in your ecosystem. Some examples are end user or username, password, date of birth, wallet, article, comment, notification, sign up, sign in, purchase, submit a post. The list goes on and on. And these are sometimes single words and sometimes phrases. The concepts document is a list of these, each with a description. And the descriptions can refer to other concepts. And ideally, they're hyperlinks to those definitions. So you're building a definition tree. Now, circular references are practically unavoidable, but you must take care that this doesn't leave the definitions unclear. And also, try not to include anything UI or UX specific, like screens, pages, widgets, etc. Now, unfortunately, this is not always avoidable, but the fewer UI things you have in there, the better. And you'll end up with a document for anyone to understand your terminology and your definitions. And when building your application, there are potentially many people involved: designers, developers, testers, investors, customers. So the concepts document is a great way to align everyone on this terminology. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's so obvious, it's so simple, why do I even need to do this? Well, you're right, it is simple and obvious, but there are real benefits to doing it. It forces you to think through all the concepts in detail. You end up with a clear, concise, complete, and correct set of concepts. Creating documentation and communication become much easier moving forward. In turn, this saves time, money, confusion, and sometimes actual issues as well. And I've seen a number of situations where terminology, especially with ambiguous words, is not locked down, and this just causes confusion. It causes backwards and forwards in emails, and ultimately leads to a lot of inefficiency and sometimes actual errors. So I'm not expecting you to read all the text in this slide, but here's an example of a concepts document, just to give you a flavor of what it might look like. And you can use a Google document, you can use Markdown, HTML, or any format of your choice. And I've created a tool specifically designed to help create these concepts documents. So the main concept, i.e. the starting point, is usually the app itself. I don't know if you can see here, just under concepts. You don't need to read it. But you start with a main concept. And as I mentioned a moment ago, each concept has a description, and that can reference other concepts. And you can see, you can just about see here, the blue, they're hyperlinks to other concepts to help navigate around this document. But note also that the process of defining your concepts may well throw up questions, or more questions, I should say. Earlier in the process, there are questions will be raised as well. But these questions that are raised in the concepts definition should also be documented here. Now, they will go into your question register later on, but that's part of the bigger process that I don't have time to cover today. Ultimately, everything should be defined in this document in terms of things that the reader understands without ambiguity. Therefore, someone who reads the whole document understands all your concepts without having to refer to other sources. Now, that was a quick and simple overview of the concepts document. It is a simple thing that can take a while to write, but it is well worth the effort. And as I mentioned, it's just one of the steps in the process of turning your brain dump into your requirements and product specifications. And as I also mentioned, I do have a cheat sheet explaining all the steps of the process, and you can use this QR code on the screen to access that cheat sheet. And also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My URL is here at the bottom. And let me know if you want to, for example, to access the tool that I use to create the concepts documents. Now, I think I have time for questions, but if you don't get, if there's no time, or if you don't get your question answered, then message me on LinkedIn any additional questions you have, and see if I can help you. So that's all I have time for. Let's see if there are any questions, but thanks very much for watching. In case there aren't, in case you don't come back to me, Sandra, thanks everyone for watching. So, okay, well, while I can't see any questions, and Sandra has left me on. So what I might do is tell you some of the common questions that that I get. So the most, no, can't see comments or questions anywhere, but okay. So the most common question that I get is, how do I get funding? Or can you help me get funding? Well, the answer is that this is not something I do directly. However, I do help to prepare your tech, your processes, and your documentation ready to get funding, and ready for your pitch deck, ready for the due diligence process. And that's, of course, by following the process that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. And so, Sandra, okay. Well, let me cover one more question then. Let me cover one more question that I sometimes get, which is, if I'm a non-technical founder, should I use someone else to design the details of my product and create the documentation? Which is a question I sometimes get. Well, the answer to that is it can't hurt to get an expert to help you. But if you know the steps of the process, and as I mentioned before, the cheat sheet contains these steps. If you know the steps and you're disciplined and you're methodical and you give it enough time and enough care and attention, then you can do this yourself, or at least you can do a first version, a first pass through, which lays your foundations, it sets the structure, and then you can always go to an expert later on or get help from your your team that you build later on, or the development provider that you hire later on, to refine this. But I do advise giving it a go yourself, trying to go through the steps yourself. It'll cost you less, it'll be more rewarding, you'll have a real handle on the product rather than relying on designers and experts. So they are two of the common questions. Sandra, perfect timing. And are there any questions for me?
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I believe you've answered them yourself. I was checking, but there's no question at the moment from anybody. But thank you so much, Stuart. That was a very great presentation, and we've really learned a whole lot. And I believe it's really impacted a lot of individuals and even startups, as you have clearly stated. And adding on the Teletubbies, I remember them so well from those days. Yes, it used to be a favorite movie like a movie or something I used to watch. They really don't say much, but just the behavior and the comic way used to be very interactive for us when we were kids. So that is a brilliant addition to it, Joe. Yes, so thank you so much.
Pleasure.
If there are no more questions or any more questions? Okay, I believe there are no more questions. And if there are no questions, that means whatever you said was very clear and very transparent for each one of us to understand. So thank you so much, Stuart. It was a very
Thank
great
you.
presentation. And for everybody or anyone looking for Stuart, he's already shared his LinkedIn. So please do connect with him, and he'll be very much glad to coach you on anything concerning software startups. So thank you so much, Stuart.
Take care.